The first month of 2024 is wrapped up. I finished 8 books this month, so I'm going to go through the books that I read and what my ratings were of them. Now, I did set a goal for myself this year for 2024 that if I feel very solidly that the book I'm reading is going to be a 3-star or less, I am trying to DNF those. I want to DNF more books because my TBR is like over 500 books long, and I just really want to focus on reading books that I'm thoroughly loving. So I think anything that's like a 3.5 or above, I'm having a really good time with. So I'm only going to be talking about the books that I finished in January this year. So I'm going to start and go with my lowest rating up to my highest rating of books. The first book on this list will be I'd Like to Play Alone Please by Tom Segura. So I chose this book because my husband and I actually saw him in December. He came to our city and for his comedy stand-up tour, and we saw his comedy special, and it was absolutely hilarious. We've watched his stand-up before and enjoy his type of humor, and he told in his set he told a lot of jokes about his family and some of his experiences. So someone had mentioned that he had wrote this collection of essays. So it's a nonfiction book, a collection of essays about his life, and he narrates it himself in the audiobook. So I was like, I'm gonna grab this and see what it's all about. It was very interesting to hear the true stories, which you can see some of the truth like rooted in his jokes about his family, whether it's his mom or his kids and his wife. So I enjoyed this one. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was a very quick listen. I want to say the audiobook was maybe only 6 hours. Each book was like a collection of short stories about him. Up next is I Fell in Love with Hope by Lynn Colley. So this book was recommended to me by a friend on Instagram, and they said, if you like sad girl shit, this is the book for you. And I was like, okay, I do tend to like some sadder element books that kind of get into just dark, deep emotions, so to speak. And this book did that. It had the dark elements and it was saturated with prose, which I find just absolutely beautiful. So it had a kind of a poetic feel to the story as a whole. What this book is about is it's set in a hospital, and the main characters in the books are long-term teen residents of this hospital. So they're there for different life-threatening conditions, and it's how they form friendships, and you learn all of their backstories, and it kind of has a little bit of a magical realism like undertone to it. So it was a very sad book. It has a lot of triggers, so you should check the trigger warnings if you have those. But I gave this book a four stars. I loved it. It was very reflective, kind of a slower paced read. It was a great recommendation from that friend. I had a great time with it. And then after I read some heavier books like I Fell in Love with Hope, I then tend to want to pick up something light and kind of like lift myself back up. So that's where I grabbed this graphic novel from, Huda F. Hairs by Huda Fahmy. So this is her second book. This is a graphic novel series, and this is the second book. And I just love it. It is hilarious. The illustrations are really bright and fun. This one is about really sisterly relationships. Huda is the main character of this book. This is a Muslim family, and they go on a road trip, I think from California to Orlando. They're going to Walt Disney World for the first time. And so it's a long road trip for the sisters. They're crammed in the car, and then the parents have a plan to pair them up on different days at the park so they can spend quality times with each of the sister groups. So this is just about family, and it's just so cute. I really enjoyed it, and this was also a 4-star read from me. And I'll read any of the graphic novels that Huda Fahmy puts out because they are just adorable. This next book was part of it's called the Traveling Bookkeepers, which is a postal book club that I am in. And what we do is each member of the book club picks a book, and then that's our own, and we read it and we highlight and mark it up with all of our notes, and we send it to the next person and they do the same. And then at the end of a period, which is like 3 to 4 months, you get your original book back, and it has everybody's notes in it. So anyways, this is called the Traveling Bookkeepers Book Club. So this was another member's pick, and it's called Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. This is my first book by this author, though a lot of her books are on my TBR, so I was really excited to get to this one. And it was so entertaining. It was also a 4-star read for me. What this book is about is you have a wide cast of characters, ranging from a vampire, a ghost, Death himself, Death's godson. You have immortals, you have demons, you have angels, reapers, just like the whole retinue of supernatural characters, right? And so the book starts off and you meet Death and his godson, and that's kind of one of the focus characters and relationships is Death and his godson, which is a human that he takes care of. And then the other plot of the book is that there is a realtor who is the vampire, and she's trying to sell this house, but there is a ghost who's refusing to leave the house, and it's haunting it and making it very hard for her to sell the house. And so she is trying to get the ghost out of her house, and it's how all these supernaturals kind of team up with that goal, but then they realize that Death has been kidnapped, and there's some type of supernatural game at play. So I know that sounds like a lot and kind of all over the place, but trust me, it works. And if you love witty banter, I'm telling you, this is the book for you to read with witty banter. Like, it could be a masterclass of witty banter. I chuckled, cracked up, was grinning. It was just like a whole experience. So if you're looking for something light, funny, with the supernatural elements to it, I definitely recommend this one. I also could see this book played out as a theatrical production. Like, there were certain lines in it to me just kind of like read almost like a show tune in my head, and I could just see this being such a epic production on stage, and I would love to see this put on as a performance. Okay, so those are my 4-star reads. Next would be my 4.5 stars. So this book is called Drift by Adrienne Young. This was actually the first book that I read in January. This was the first book of the year. So this is a novella set in her fable and namesake world. So if you're not familiar with that, it's a young adult series set in a fictional set of islands. A lot of the books take place on a ship, like merchant ships taking items from one island to the next, and different elements in there. So this is a novella of 2 side characters from that fable namesake series world. This was a very quick read. I'm wanting to say it was only maybe 80, 90 pages. And I loved it. I thought that it was great. I'm a sucker for that series as a whole. I love anything nautical. So anytime I'm around the ocean or ships, I have a great time. So this is Willa and Coy's story. I was a little shocked at the end of it. So if you've read this one, like, we need to talk, because this one didn't end quite like how a lot of novellas end. And it has my brain kind of spinning on whether or not there's going to be more books in this world or not. So that one just left me thinking about a lot of things. But that was a 4.5-star read for me. I had a lot of fun going through that one. This next book was my own book club, Live with Coco and Cheese book pick for January. So we have a book club that we run over on Instagram, and I'll put my social media information here for you if you want to follow me there. But we run a book club every month where we pick a book, read it, and then Chi and I go live and we discuss it with everybody, and it's lots of fun. So for January, we read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. So this book was the perfect book to read in January. It captured just like a winter setting so perfectly, and it had hints of magic all throughout it. So the story is about a scholar researcher who works at a university, and she studies fae and fairies in this world. And fae are well known. They are like a species that are just kind of elusive, and so that's what her field of study is. They call it dryology. And this story is about her going to a very remote village in Norway. So right as the cusp of winter. I want to say she gets there in November, perhaps. And so it's the cusp of winter. She spends winter there. There's a lot of winter elemental type fae that she interacts with, and it's her going there to finish writing her encyclopedia of fairies and her adventures of while she's in this little remote village town. So I thoroughly enjoyed this one. It reminded me a lot of some other of my favorite books, and I thought that the characters were very cute, and it was just a heartwarming read and a great one to read in the winter if you're just looking for something kind of cozy. Okay, so now for my 5-star reads. I only had 2 5-star reads for January, and one of them was a reread. So A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas is the next book that I read. And this was 5 stars, which I expected it to be, especially if I'm rereading it. That means I loved it the first time. I actually think this is like my 3rd or 4th time rereading this one. This is a part of one of my favorite series. And I had a friend that was wanting to read it for the first time and was looking for people to buddy read with her. And especially as I was getting very excited for Sarah J. Maas's new release that came out in January for her Crescent City series, I was just kind of craving one of her books. So whenever the friend said, hey, does anyone want to buddy read this? I was like, yes, I volunteer. I will definitely buddy read that. And again, I just love it. So if you're looking for this first book, if you've never read any of Sarah J. Maas's books, she tends to do fantasy stories that are steeped around fae, once again. Yeah, there's kind of a theme here of what I love. So this A Court of Thorns and Roses, when I first picked it up the very first time, all I knew about it was that it was a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but with the fae world. And as I go back and read this first one, that still holds true, but the series evolves to be something so much more than just that. But this first one really does feel like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. There is a human girl, and she does something, and a beast swoops in and makes her go live on his land as a consequence of the thing that she does. And then it's about her living as his captor, and then what transpires from there. So if you haven't read any of Sarah J. Maas's books, this is the first one I ever picked up, and I love it, and I'm very biased. So this wasn't a surprise that it was a 5-star read for me, and I'm sure I will read it again at some point because I just adore it. So don't be surprised if you see the second book on my February wrap-up, because I am thinking about it now. All right, the last book on this list, and I think this is going to win my top book for January, since my other 5-star was a reread, is going to be Heartstopper Volume 5 by Alice Oseman. I love the Heartstopper world. I was a huge fan of this series before it became the Netflix show that it is, and I'm so happy with the casting that show did, and that the show has brought like a whole new reader base to this series because it is just so gorgeous. So the author is also the illustrator and does so not just the storyline, but the illustrations in the books as well. And the story is about Nick and Charlie, which are 2 teenage boys who develop feelings for each other, and it is just absolutely charming. It will have you grinning, and it touches on some deeper levels of like things that teens and kids go through, and so it just covers a little bit of everything. So this is volume 5. I definitely recommend you reading these and watching the show. They are both all fantastic. So this volume specifically focuses on Nick and Charlie's romantic relationship going to a next level, as well as Nick preparing to go to college and thinking about what colleges he wants to go to and all of the feelings that come along, because there's an age gap between Nick and Charlie. So Nick is older, so how will that affect their relationship with Nick going to college and Charlie still being in high school? So it just kind of explores all those dynamics of the relationship of those two. But this one just had me grinning and was super cute and refreshing read. So this is going to be my top read for January 2024. So these are the 8 books that I finished in January that had a 3.5-star rating or above. And yeah, I can't wait to see what books make my list for February. So let me know if you've read any of these, what you think of them, or what your favorite book of January was.